Holy War Cerberus, Fatalite of Dragon Time, begins by showing a woman named Kismitete chained under the full moon. A group of black-hooded magicians wants to make her as an offering to a demon dragon named Daganzord. Not long after, Daganzord finally appeared there. However, the unexpected thing happened when the demon dragon was about to prey on Kismitete. Suddenly, she can break free from her bonds and turn the chains that bind her into a sword to fight Daganzord. As it turned out, the ritual was not an offering to the demon dragon but a sealing ritual for Daganzord to be performed by Kismitete's husband, Bairo, where she served as bait to lure Daganzord out of his hiding place. Because Daganzord always brings disaster to the country, Bairo and Kismitete also intend to seal the demon dragon so that it will no longer cause damage to their country. However, just as the sealing ritual was nearing completion, Daganzord launched an unexpected attack on Bairo, causing him to be badly injured and the seal shattered. Daganzord, who escaped, then tried to attack Hiiro, Bairo's son, who also happened to be there to witness the ritual. He saw this and immediately rushed to save his son using his magic power. However, for some reason, Hiiro had the same mark as the demon dragon on his body, until in the end, there was a huge explosion that shattered the place. 10 years later, Hiiro, who has now grown up, decides to become an adventurer. One day, he arrived at a fairly bustling trading town. Apart from him, a wealthy man named Nanbuko also just arrived in the city. Nanbuko, who is a weapons broker, then distributes free coins to the residents of the city. However, Hiiro didn't care about that at all and was more interested in going to a small merchant who sold badges, which were said to be able to ward off the attacks of the demon dragon, Daganzord. But then, the badge is stolen by a boy who runs away from there. However, his escape action did not last long because he was immediately caught by a large man who was the bodyguard of the merchant and was about to beat him. Seeing this, Hiiro did not just stay silent and drew his sword at the big man, asking him to free the boy. Several people who witnessed the incident assumed that Hiiro was a formidable swordsman because he could draw such a large sword with one hand. However, he chose to settle the matter without violence and paid the merchant with gold coins for the badge. In the end, the boy managed to steal the badge from him. However, it didn't take long for Hiiro to find the boy's hiding place and retrieve the badge that now belonged to him. On the other hand, a large man named Giruu and his partner, a male creature named Parupa, are looking for Hiiro's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Nanbuko is seen at a noble's house and threatens a man to sell his rare magic items. He then offered the nobleman a magic item called Grand Troa if he was willing to sell all the rare magic items in his possession. But then, Grand Troa is stolen by a boy who sneaks through the room's ceiling. Knowing that, Nanbuko then ordered his henchmen to arrest that boy. Turning back to Hiiro, who was chasing the thief boy, who turned out to be Tomite, along with his friends. During the chase, Tomite is confronted by several of his friends, who tell them that one of their friends has been captured by Nanbuko and is about to be executed for stealing Grand Troa. The next day, everyone gathered in the town square, where the boy thief will be executed by Nanbuko's henchmen led by a girl named Sharasharu. When Tomite and his friends are confused about how to save their friend, Hiiro appears and offers to help them. Hiiro stepped forward to challenge Nanbuko's henchmen. Sharasharu accepted the challenge and used her magic power to create an explosion. He managed to survive the explosion and then launched an attack on them. However, the attack did not work because Hiiro did not have a capable fighting ability. He immediately became the target of Nanbuko's henchmen who surrounded him, which was then used by Tomite to free his friend. Not long after, Giruu arrived and saved Hiiro from the attacks. But then, Sharasharu took out Grand Troa and used the magic item to increase her magic power. Hiiro, who knew that Grand Troa was his father's magic item, seemed very surprised because it was in Sharasharu's hands. With Grand Troa's power, she multiplied her attacks many times and launched an attack at Hiiro. However, suddenly a magic barrier appeared around him, bouncing off her attack. The magic barrier turned out to be from Daganzord, who also suddenly appeared there and went on a rampage to cause damage. Seeing the appearance of Daganzord, Nanbuko's henchmen then launched a full attack at it, trying to subdue it. However, a strange thing happened when some of their arrows were about to hit Hiiro, as Daganzord seemed to be protecting him from their attacks. After that, Daganzord finally disappeared by going to the ground. The scene then switches to the past, showing Hiiro, who had just lost his parents after the Daganzord sealing ritual failed and caused his parents to die. After his parents' death, he was raised by Giruu. He also teaches Hiiro to practice swordsmanship so that he can become a formidable swordsman who will later be able to protect himself. However, Hiiro was determined to take revenge on Daganzord, who had killed his parents. Back to the present, Tomite then mocked Hiiro's poor fighting ability and said that he would never be able to defeat Daganzord with his abilities like that. However, he was not discouraged and determined to improve his abilities with Grand Troa, his father's magic item now in Nanbuko's hands. Because of that, Hiiro intended to meet Nanbuko and take back the Grand Troa that belonged to his father. However, when he arrived, Nanbuko turned out to have left the city and ordered his henchmen and Sharu to arrest and investigate him. Hiiro and his companions then went to a diner, where the people there rejected their presence because the people turned out to be on Nanbuko's side. A cat-like girl named Aaron then met Hiiro and his companions and told a restaurant that was willing to accept their presence. She turns out to know that Hiiro is Bairo's son. However, it is unknown exactly where she came to know about it and what her goal was to help Hiiro because she then left. Before continuing their journey to find Nanbuko's whereabouts, Hiiro and his companions decided to stay at Tomite and Company's place for a while. Giruu also plans to train Hiiro so that he can fight against the monsters that they will certainly face along the way. After training him to deal with slime monsters, Giruu then left for a while to hunt monsters to sell and earn money. Shortly after Giruu's departure, a giant sand dragon monster appeared behind Parupa. Seeing that, Hiiro then prepared to fight the monster, but his attacks didn't work at all. The sand dragon then opened its mouth, and a blue-haired girl was in that mouth. She was not about to be eaten by the dragon, but she asked the dragon to be her ride to take her to her destination. After that, she came out of the sand dragon's mouth and thanked it for helping her. The girl who introduced herself as Sarado hugged Hiiro while saying she wanted him to come with her. Even though he didn't know her, she seemed to know him quite well and knew the demonic dragon's mighty power resided within him. Giruu, who had returned from his hunt, seemed suspicious of Sarado and asked Hiiro not to deal with her. Because of that, Hiiro and his companions slipped away, leaving her behind. Elsewhere, Sharu and Nanbuko's men are seen searching for Hiiro and his companions across the city. Despite being helped by many people, they had difficulty finding his whereabouts. However, that was not the case with Sarado, who somehow could easily find him. Because of that, in the end, Hiiro asked Tomite to accept Sarado's presence there. One day, when Hiiro was training to use the sword accompanied by Sarado, suddenly a wolf monster appeared and was about to attack her. He tried to protect her with all his might until, in the end, he managed to overthrow the wolf monster. He rushed over to her to ask about her condition, but as it turned out, Sarado had no idea what had happened because she was sleeping with her eyes open. She, who saw Hiiro's shoulder, was injured, then immediately treated it with her strength. After that, he sold his first hunt to get money. Sometime later, Hiiro met a man who was forcibly taken away by some of the men of a noble man. He tried to help the man because he felt sorry for his kids, who were crying uncontrollably when the soldiers were about to take their father. However, because Hiiro's fighting ability was so poor, he was caught by the soldiers. Elsewhere, Sharu, who received news that Hiiro was captured by a nobleman, ordered her men to rush there. Long story short, Sarado then infiltrated the nobleman's house to save Hiiro with the help of Tomite. As a professional thief, Tomite can easily infiltrate the nobleman's room and steal his cash book, which turns out to have committed massive corruption. Tomite threatened to report the actions of the nobleman who had caused a lot of damage to the palace if he did not release Hiiro and everyone who was currently in his prison. However, the nobleman didn't seem afraid of the threat and immediately summoned his men to ambush Tomite and Sarado. But then, Giruu and Parupa, who had just returned from hunting, arrived there and drew their large sword at the nobleman, which then made him drop his sword so that Tomite also managed to get back the ledger and again threatened the nobleman. Ultimately, they managed to free Hiiro and everyone else who was imprisoned and rushed away from there. Not long after, Sharu arrived with her men to take Hiiro away, but the nobleman told her that they had all left. One day, while Hiiro was training with Giruu, Aaron met Sarado, who was walking in the city, took her to a hot spring lake, and told her that the lake water can cure any disease. The innocent Sarado then threw herself into the lake. Aaron apparently wanted to find out about Hiiro from her. On the other hand, Sharu was also at the lake to freshen up. Knowing that she was the one who wanted to catch Hiiro, Aaron tried to prevent her from bringing up Hiiro. The three then discussed the monsters that often appeared around the lake. At the same time, Parupa and Tomite were seen heading to the same lake carrying a leaflet that said whoever caught the monster in the lake would be rewarded with 300 gold coins. Turning back to Hiiro, who was training with Giruu, he seemed irritated that Giruu only told him to fight weak slime monsters. In fact, he wanted to face real monsters on the way so that they could find Nanbuko as soon as possible and obtain the Grand Troa. However, Giruu said that Hiiro's current abilities weren't enough to deal with the wild monsters out there, let alone to defeat Daganzord, who even was able to defeat his parents and the 100 great magicians who tried to seal him. Feeling belittled, an irritated Hiiro then attacked him. On the other hand, Giruu, who had excellent reflexes, accidentally drew his greatsword and injured Hiiro with his sword slash. Giruu panicked and then asked Parupa and Tomite for help, who happened to pass by where they were training. The three of them then took Hiiro to the lake referred to in the leaflet, where they also intended to prove the rumors about the lake's healing power. As expected, the slash wound on Hiiro's chest had completely healed, proving that the lake water was healing. On the other hand, Sharu, who saw Hiiro's presence in the lake, ordered her henchmen to summon the monster that resided in the lake. The monster actually appeared, but strangely, the monster only attacked Sarado. Sharu tried to control the lake monster, but she was thrown far away. In the end, Giruu manages to save Sarado and defeat the monster. However, when they were about to exchange the monster for 300 gold coins according to the leaflet they got, it turned out that the leaflet was a fake, and there was no mission at all. Turns out, it was all a sly ploy by Sharu, who made the fake leaflets to lure Hiiro and his companions to hunt down the monster. Even so, they could still sell the monster meat to the nobles and earn some money. A few days later, Tomite and his friends looked gloomy because Hiiro and his party decided to embark on a journey to find Nanbuko. Hiiro apparently agreed to this after seeing Hiiro, who was so determined to take his revenge on Daganzord. Seeing Hiiro earnest in achieving his goals inspires Tomite to do the same, and he decides to join Hiiro's party members so he can have adventures and gain experience. On the way, Hiiro's party reunited with Eren, who told her about Sharu, who had trapped them by luring out the lake monsters to attack them. She then says that she has a map and knows where Nanbuko is. However, if Hiiro wanted to get it, he had to accept her as one of his party members. On the other hand, unbeknownst to Hiiro and his party members, one of Nanbuko's minions, a large bird named Hawkeye, was stalking their movements from the air. While Hiiro and his party members were resting in the forest, Hawkeye attacked them, where he could take Hiiro down quite easily. Giruu tried to help him, but the large bird dodged their attack instead. The next day, Hiiro pretended to be the party's leader and walked to the front. Hawkeye was stalking them again while informing Sharu of their whereabouts. With her magic power, Sharu then teleported with her henchmen there. Arriving there, Sharu, who can summon 3 giant monsters at once, then ordered them to attack Hiiro and his party members. Without thinking, Hiiro attacked her, while Giruu had to face her henchmen and the giant monsters alone. Due to the dangerous situation, Parupa takes out a magic card that can spawn a rabbit-like girl named Mumu, who has the power to teleport. Parupa moved Tomite, Sarado, and Eren from the battle site. Seeing Hiiro overwhelmed with Sharu, Giruu also tried to help him. However, Sharu immediately noticed that and immobilized Giruu with her terrifying magic power. She then said that she would kill him right now. Upon hearing that, Hiiro instantly became furious and accidentally awakened the power of the demon dragon in his body. Seeing Hiiro, who very easily slaughtered Sharu's henchmen and destroyed her giant monster, made her frightened, and she decided to run away from the battle site. Not long after, Hiiro, whose body was still weak from the battle, saw Nanbuko's group passing not far away. Without thinking, he followed them. Shortly afterward, Parupa and the others finally returned to their original place and found an injured and unconscious Giruu. Sarado immediately healed him with her power while Parupa and Tomite searched for Hiiro's whereabouts. They didn't find Hiiro anywhere and were astonished to see that all of Nanbuko's henchmen had been killed. Meanwhile, Hiiro watched Nanbuko from a distance and saw that he was meeting a princess. Nanbuko wants to demonstrate a magic tool made by an old man named Bakrapa that can create monsters from a combination of 3 adult men and an ogre. He wants to sell the tool to the princess for a fairly high price and tries to convince her that the tool will be very useful in the war to conquer other kingdoms. Seeing Nanbuko, who often played with human lives, Hiiro became angry and showed up in front of him. However, Hiiro, who was weak, could easily be caught by Nanbuko's men. After that, he thought that Hiiro had important information about Daganzord. Soon after, he tried to torture Hiiro to get that information. Nanbuko wants to resurrect Daganzord because Daganzord can spread threat and chaos worldwide. If the situation in this world was chaotic and wars were going on everywhere, Nanbuko intended to be the sole supplier of weapons so that he could make a huge profit. When he was about to torture Hiiro, suddenly, the princess forced her way into his tent, so he had to give up on torturing Hiiro and left his tent to meet her. This was then used by Hiiro to free himself from Nanbuko using his dragon badge. However, not long after, Bakrapa entered the tent and interrogated Hiiro because he could notice Sarado's smell on his body, which confused him about how Bakrapa knew her. However, he did not explain further and only asked Hiiro to protect her because he was her destiny. Bakrapa then helped him by giving Hiiro a potion that could make him teleport to where Sarado was. Before Hiiro left, Bakrapa told him that he would meet a man named Theo one day. Meanwhile, Nanbuko, who discovered that Bakrapa had helped Hiiro, looked very angry at him. However, Nanbuko decided to keep him alive because he still needed Bakrapa's ability to make many weapons and magic items. Elsewhere, Hiiro, who had finally reunited with his party members, asked Sarado about Bakrapa, who simply referred to him as her father. Realizing that they said there was the power of a demon dragon in Hiiro's body, Giruu then concluded that he might have been connected to Daganzord. He assumed that Hiiro's heart was actually Daganzord's. Therefore, during his last appearance, Daganzord tried to protect Hiiro from the attacks of Nanbuko's henchmen. Giruu also thought that it might be Hiiro's father who wanted to protect him when Daganzord was about to attack him 10 years ago. Bairo, who realized that he did not have enough strength to defeat the demon dragon, decided to seal and fuse Daganzord in his son's body. Hearing this, Hiiro became frustrated because the Daganzord he had hated so much was actually inside his own body. Harupa then tried to comfort Hiiro by saying they didn't know what happened 10 years ago. However, one thing was certain: Bairo would do everything in his power to protect him, even at the cost of his own life. Because of that, Hiiro had to stay alive for the sake of his parents, who had sacrificed for him. Hiiro was excited again, and the fact that Daganzord was in his body did not necessarily dampen his intention to take back his father's Grand Troa. Hiiro wanted to use the power of Grand Troa to grant any wish. Hiiro and his party members then continued their journey and finally arrived at an abandoned village. Being in the village, Giruu is reminded of his past, where his parents were executed by the ogres because his father, who was an ogre, married a human girl. At that time, the young Giruu managed to escape from the ogres who were about to execute him and met Hiiro's father, who then saved him. Because of that, he really loved and cared about Hiiro after his parents died. On the other hand, Tomite, who was going around to check the situation in the village, saw a lot of scratch marks and corpses lying on a collapsed building, which was caused by a monster created by Nanbuko. Tomite manages to escape from the monster's attack and alerts his friends. Hiiro then tried to awaken the power of the demon dragon but failed. Luckily, Giruu quickly knocked the monster down before he could attack Hiiro. Meanwhile, Eren, who had separated from Hiiro's party members, secretly headed to the Nanbuko residence to sell information about Hiiro and Daganzord for a rare magic item called Alshina. After she left, Nanbuko called Sharisharu and ordered her to kill Hiiro. Sometime later, Hiiro and his party members finally arrived at a town where he wanted to buy a new sword to replace the sword he broke during the fight against Sharisharu a few weeks ago. They then went to a shop selling weapons and finally found a sword suitable for him. In the evening, at dinner, Hiiro and his companions discussed Bakrapa's words that one day he would meet a man named Theo. Giruu and Parapa apparently know Theo, who is none other than Bairo's physician. Unexpectedly, Sarado also knew Theo and said he was her friend. Hearing this, Hiiro and his companions decided to find his whereabouts first. However, not long after, there was chaos caused by a black shadow figure. They immediately rushed to the scene and watched as the shadowy black figure swallowed the residents, including Giruu. Hiiro thought that the shadowy figure was Daganzord. But then, Sharisharu arrives and informs him that the black shadow figure is a monster created by Bakrapa named Daku. She then ordered Daku to kill Giruu while she would end Hiiro's life by stabbing his heart. However, Sharisharu's actions awakened the power of the demon dragon residing in Hiiro's body, which then made him lose control, and unknowingly summoned Daganzord. On the other hand, Eren helps Giruu to free himself from Daku's trap. After that, he tried to help Hiiro, who went mad and let Daganzord kill Daku. However, Hiiro, who lost control, did not recognize who was his friend and who was his enemy, so he then attacked Giruu, who tried to help him. Seeing Giruu collapse due to his attack made him regain his senses until finally, Daganzord disappeared. The next day, Hiiro then apologized to Giruu for attacking him. Giruu accepted Hiiro's apology. However, he asked Hiiro not to use the demon dragon's power anymore because Giruu was worried that the power would have a bad effect on his body. The scene then switches and shows Nanbuko spreading false news to the entire kingdom that one of the kingdoms managed to capture Daganzord and will use the power of the demon dragon to conquer other kingdoms. Hearing the news, the three greatest kingdoms immediately prepared their troops for battle and ordered a lot of weapons from Nanbuko. All of that had been planned by Nanbuko to make all the kingdoms war with each other. A few days later, Hiiro and his party members then continued their journey, where they planned to find out Theo's whereabouts first. However, unexpectedly, Theo came to them in the middle of the trip. After a long time, he seemed happy to reunite with Sarado and invited them all to his residence. Hiiro then told what had happened to him, but Theo also didn't know what to do to solve the problem. Even though he couldn't find a solution, Theo said that he could teach Hiiro to use magic because, as it turned out, Theo was one of the greatest magicians in the kingdom. He could even mimic Daganzord's most powerful attacks and deal the same amount of damage. Seeing the magic power possessed by Theo, Hiiro also asked why Theo did not help his parents to seal Daganzord 10 years ago. He then said that no matter how great their magic power, it would not be enough to defeat Daganzord. On the other hand, Eren is seen using Alshina to listen to the conversation between Nanbuko and representatives of the three kingdoms. They are preparing to start a war because of the lies that Nanbuko told about Daganzord. Under Theo's guidance, Hiiro began to practice the Koku magic sword technique, and unexpectedly, Hiiro was able to master the technique quickly. That night, Theo, talking to Giruu, said that Hiiro had a special talent to become a great magician like his father. Because of that, Hiiro was more suited to being a mage than a swordsman. Not only that, but Theo also said that Hiiro must have extraordinary strength because he can withstand the tremendous power of the demon dragon. In fact, the Koku sword Hiiro performed when he first did it was superb, and Theo survived because he activated the magic shield automatically. Theo also advised Giruu to always take care of him and Sarado because they are a couple and must always be together. The next day, Theo asked Hiiro to perform the Koku sword technique, and if Hiiro's attack managed to slash him, then Hiiro would be declared past and could continue his journey. Hiiro again launched an attack with Koku's sword technique. Everyone looked surprised that nothing had happened. Even so, Sarado praised his prowess, and Theo immediately stated that he had successfully passed the test. After that, they continued their journey to find Nambuko's whereabouts. Although it seemed that nothing happened when Hiiro performed the Koku magic sword technique, apparently, his attack was able to destroy Theo's magic shield and injure him. Because of this, he stated that Hiiro had successfully mastered the technique so that Hiiro could continue his journey with his companions. After a long journey, Hiiro and his party members arrived at the vast desert, which was said to be the closest border to the area where Nambuko lived. Soon after, Hiiro and the others were again surprised by Hawkeye's appearance, who then launched an attack on them. He also wondered how Hawkeye could find out where they were in the middle of the desert. But then, Nambuko's voice was heard from Alshina's magic item that Eren brought. Because of that, they accused Eren of being a spy for Nambuko. Eren did not deny the accusations and revealed that she was indeed an information broker. Knowing that she cannot be trusted, Hiiro and his party members decide to continue their journey without her. Meanwhile, at Nambuko's headquarters, Bakrapa is seen conducting an experiment by combining Sharasharu with a pet beast so that she can increase her strength. On the other hand, the three great kingdoms consumed by Nambuko's incitement to war with each other seemed not ready to start a battle for one reason or another. A few days later, Hiiro and his companions seemed lost in the vast desert because they had left Eren, their guide. Parupa, who did not pay attention to his steps, fell and had trouble saving himself until Eren finally arrived and saved him. Realizing that they wouldn't be able to get out of there without her help, they decided to work with Eren again until they found Nambuko's whereabouts. But then, a sandstorm hit them straight away and separated Hiiro and his party members into three groups. After they tried to find each other, Giruu and Tomite met Parupa and Eren. They then looked for the whereabouts of Hiiro and Sarado. But after searching for some time, they found a refreshing oasis and decided to take a break. Meanwhile, Hiiro and Sarado met Sharasharu, who had evolved and become stronger. Even though he had mastered Koku's magic sword technique, Hiiro had not been able to match her, so he was easily defeated by her, who then brought him to Nambuko's place. Elsewhere, the three great kingdoms about to go to war sent their troops to the place where Daganzord was sealed many years ago. They prepare to start a battle because each suspects that one has succeeded in controlling Daganzord and will conquer the other kingdom. They didn't seem to realize that Nambuko had used them for personal gain. Moreover, he turned out to have a more sinister purpose behind all of this. When finally reunited with Hiiro, Nambuko then revealed that he was the one who had shot arrows at his father to destroy the defenses of the magicians who were about to seal Daganzord. He became very angry, especially after Nambuko said that he didn't want Daganzord to be sealed because it could harm him and destroy his weapons sales plan. At that time, Nambuko also stole Bairo's Grand Troa. Hiiro then launched an attack on Nambuko. However, again, due to his poor fighting ability, the attack had no effect on Nambuko. Elsewhere, Giruu and the others finally managed to reunite with Sarado. Sarado turned out to have summoned a giant dragon which then brought them all to the Nambuko residence to save Hiiro. Long story short, they finally arrived at Nambuko's headquarters. However, Nambuko's men soon discovered their presence, bringing down the dragon. Luckily, they managed to escape and hide in a safe place before Nambuko's men caught them. Bakrapa turns out to know Sarado's arrival, and then secretly meets her, then transfers them to his laboratory through a magic portal. He then reveals that Nambuko is not a human but a magic doll that he created on orders from the real Nambuko. Bakrapa created Sarado from the blood crystal of the demon dragon Daganzord. Actually, Nambuko wanted a tough soldier who could bring many benefits to him. However, Bakrapa instead created a magic doll as a girl, so Nambuko became angry and ordered him to destroy it. Bakrapa, who had considered Sarado his own daughter, certainly couldn't do that and finally let her run away from there. After hearing his explanation, Giruu and the others finally realized why Hiiro and Sarado had to always be together because apparently, they had an important part of Daganzord. Knowing that Hiiro was in danger because Nambuko was planning to kill him, Sarado rushed to save him, even though Bakrapa forbade her to act rashly. Nanbuko turns out to be deliberately holding Hiiro hostage and threatens to kill him, only to lure Sarado to come there because Nanbuko needs them to carry out her plan. Seeing that, Giruu tried to save them, but he had to deal with Sharasharu, who didn't just let him go. When Giruu and the others had to face Sharasharu and Nanbuko's men, Hiiro and Sarado had already been taken away by Nanbuko to the battlefield. Arriving there, Nanbuko finally revealed his true goal, to create the strongest warrior by uniting everyone there with himself by using Grand Troa, Bakrapa's magic item, and an important part of Daganzord that was inside Hiiro and Sarado's bodies. Nanbuko then activated the magic item created by Bakrapa in his base. However, to activate the tool, Nanbuko required enormous magic power. Because of that, Nanbuko planned to sacrifice everyone there, including Sharasharu and his own men. He then tries to do something to Sarado. However, Bakrapa got there first and tried to stop him. Even so, Bakrapa was no match for him, who could easily take him down. Nanbuko finally manages to control Sarado and does something to her so that she fights Hiiro to awaken Daganzord that resides in his body. Meanwhile, at Nanbuko's headquarters, Parupa tries to enlist Mumu's help to get them out of there. However, Mumu, interested in money, asked Parupa to pay her the appropriate price. Since he didn't have enough money to pay her, Eren offered her some precious gems, so Mumu finally agreed to help them. Unexpectedly, Sharasharu, who feels betrayed by her boss, decides to help them so they can all get out of there. Long story short, Hiiro was finally able to awaken the power of the demon dragon from within him and then launched an attack on Nanbuko. At the same time, Giruu and the others arrived and helped him. But as it turned out, Sharasharu betrayed them instead and attacked Giruu. Hiiro's fight against Sarado was able to awaken Daganzord, according to Nanbuko's plan. Therefore, Nanbuko immediately activated the device to initiate the fusion without wasting more time and managed to unite himself with Daganzord. With the current demonic dragon power, Nanbuko was no match for Hiiro, who only had Daganzord's heart. Hiiro did not give up because he was reminded of his parents, who fought desperately to seal Daganzord for everyone's safety. On the other hand, Eren asked Bakrapa about how to stop all this. Bakrapa tells them that they must destroy all three tools simultaneously and take the Grand Troa, which is the source of the magic power used by Nanbuko. Bakrapa, Tomite, and Eren finally managed to deactivate the device, stopping the magic power flow towards Nanbuko. However, even though they had taken Grand Troa, Nanbuko said it was too late. He then unleashed Daganzord's soul-destroying fire technique, which then caused a huge explosion like 10 years ago. However, Sarado, who had regained consciousness, managed to protect everyone with her strength. But an angry Nanbuko stabbed Sarado in the back, right in front of Hiiro. Seeing this, he instantly became furious and used Koku's sword technique to slash at Nanbuko's body. After Nanbuko was defeated, Daganzord came out of his body. Without thinking, Hiiro then asked Tomite to throw Grand Troa at him, and Hiiro used Grand Troa to create Koku's sword of light and slashed at Daganzord's body. Unexpectedly, Hiiro's heart had been inside Daganzord's body all this time. He then took the heart and gave it to Sarado to bring her back to life. Not long after, she finally returned to life, along with Daganzord's missing body. After that, Parupa, Tomite, and Eren fought over the Grand Troa until it finally fell and shattered. Giruu, who saw it, said it was a fake Grand Troa because the real Grand Troa can't just be destroyed. Parupa also wondered why Hiiro could cast such powerful magic power to defeat Nanbuko if Grand Troa was fake. Giruu said it was Hiiro's true power because, in truth, Hiiro had a very special magic power. The anime ends with Hiiro, who decides to embark on an adventure, and trains to become a great sword knight, because it turns out that he does not want to become a magician despite being born with special talents as a magician. The moral we can learn from this anime is to do whatever we want, even though everyone says we should do the opposite. Even though we are talented at doing something, it doesn't necessarily guarantee our happiness. However, never waste our talents. It would be better if we could do whatever we want while utilizing our talents to make our dreams come true.